The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and thanks for joining today's webinar with Checkpoint, looking at some of the more advanced endpoint threats that are emerging in the marketplace and what businesses can do to counteract those. I'm delighted to be joined today by Adi Ringrose, who's one of the threat prevention specialists at Checkpoint, who's going to be taking you through the bulk of today's presentation. So just a bit of an agenda for today's session. We will do a very brief introduction to Bytes and the setting the scene for the webinar today, before Adi then takes us through some of the insights Checkpoint have gleaned from their international research into endpoint threats, revealing the good, the bad and the scary that's out there and hitting organisations at the moment. Adi and his colleague Andy Nicholson will then be taking you through some best practices and solutions that you can use to prepare a solid defence, and also share some of the technology Checkpoint has developed within their Sandblast threat prevention family, specifically to tackle advanced threats at the endpoint, before an interactive Q&A at the end. So a bit of housekeeping for today's session. Attendee lines will be on mute throughout today's presentation. Of course, questions are welcome throughout the session, so please do take the opportunity as those arise in your minds to post them via questions or via the chat box, and I will pose them to our two specialists at the end. In terms of the rules of today's session, we will be keeping discussions today to strategy and solutions. We won't be getting in depth into any commercials on any products on this particular session. Of course, those conversations are more than welcome via your Bytes account manager after the webinar. We are recording today's session and we will make that available for you to share with your teams via a link at the end of the session. And lastly, a quick request from me. We do have a very short feedback survey at the end of the session. Please do take the opportunity to fill that in. It just takes a minute in order for us to develop further educational sessions to make sure they're hitting the mark content-wise. So who are Bytes? Bytes Security Partnerships are the security specialist reseller within the Bytes Allied Electronics Group. And we've been focusing solely on security for over 16 years before our acquisition from Bytes. Our ethos as a company is to marry up the agility and the insight and a specialist approach you would expect from the smallest, most specialist partner with the stability and the global resources and scope that comes from being part of a large group. We're exceptionally proud at Bytes of the technical expertise that we offer around Checkpoint and around the other technologies that we offer and recommend to customers. This not only enables us to offer a suite of technical services, including 24/7 support, third-line support, installation and maintenance and strategy and solution scoping, down to the actual deployment on-site of technologies. We work across the full spectrum of information security, from the next generation firewalling and endpoint that we're discussing with you today, through cloud, mobile security, access authentication, data loss prevention and other elements of security. And across all of those, what we offer is that second pair of hands within your technical support teams in order to make sure that that technology is deployed to best effect, that you're planning and introducing the right solutions to meet the emerging threats out there in the marketplace, and that your security strategy is developing in line with the emerging threats that we're seeing in the marketplace. That's more than enough about us. Why are we talking to people around advanced attack protection specifically for the endpoint? Well, it's increasingly being recognised that whilst there are a myriad of different ways hackers can take to attack businesses, endpoints are one of the weakest links in the security chain. Increasingly, hackers are looking to compromise vulnerable endpoints in order to move laterally and spread attacks within the organisation. At the same time, ever new attack methods are developing, so there are more zero-day attacks and new malware being developed every day, and this makes it increasingly difficult for security teams to keep up using legacy methods and using traditional signature-based solutions. At the same time, it's that perfect storm with the introduction of the dreaded G word, GDPR, where it has never been more damaging to a business to be breached. We only have to look at the last month of headlines with BA, Ticketmaster, MageCar, all of these different types of vulnerabilities being exploited and all of these very large organizations being breached, to understand that it's really important for companies to regularly update themselves on the latest emerging threats so they can prepare for those, and also understand some of the more advanced tools and tactics that they have at their disposal in order to fight back. So all that remains for me to do is to introduce Adi. First of all, he's a specialist sales manager and engineer for Checkpoint Sandblast Threat Prevention. We've been working with Checkpoint since day dot. So we've been a 4-star elite partner, top tier partner of theirs for over 5 years, because they really are a global leader across both network, endpoint and next generation threat prevention. So no longer just a traditional firewall. We find that they're increasingly developing products and solutions which will help people in their fight against advanced threats. And so who better really to ask to share some insight into advanced endpoint threats than those specialists that have a global network of knowledge base and knowledge network on what specific threats are being most damaging and how businesses can develop their strategies to respond. So all that remains for me to do now is to hand over to Adi. Adi will be speaking for around about 15 minutes, looking at some of the emerging threats and the emerging malware out there, and he'll be then joined by his colleague Andy Nicholson, who can take you through some of the solutions that Checkpoint have developed in order to help your business respond. Over to Adi. So if you can just share your slides, Adi, that would be great.
I've already shown you've actually handed it over to the wrong AD. If you wouldn't mind changing it.
Let me try again.
Thank you.
Live demonstrations. Hopefully you can now share your screen. Perfect.
Good stuff. Thank you. Right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, Shona. As Shona mentioned, I am the Threat Prevention Sales Manager for Checkpoint Software Technologies. I'll cover what that means shortly. Also joining us later will be Andy Nicholson from our Threat Prevention Engineering team, who'll be taking you through a demonstration. But first, a quick introduction to myself. I've been working within the computer networking and security industry for around 15 years. Started off in wireless communications and network optimization with value-added resellers. I then moved into more kind of pure play security VARs and managed security services providers, working with a myriad of technologies from network-centric firewalling and IPS through to more data center focused technologies such as identity and access management and data governance. Over the last few years, I've been working within the vendor community for a large AV provider and some network security startups. I promise to get to what I do now. As a threat prevention sales manager at Checkpoint, I'm responsible for our award-winning enterprise security platform, Sandblast. Sandblast is built from the ground up to deliver prevention of what Checkpoint term the 5th generation of cyber attacks. Brief agenda for the session. Firstly, I'll be talking about the problem that we're solving with Sandblast and the general threat landscape, how it's changed between 2017 and 2018. I'll then move on to talk about attack surfaces and vectors that we need to cover, and don't worry, I will clarify what we mean by this shortly. I'll talk a bit about Checkpoint's award-winning enterprise security architecture, enabling proactive prevention from sophisticated cyber attacks. And then we'll move into the agent specifically, and finally I'll hand over to Andy Nicholson for a demonstration. So let's kick off by digging into the current threat landscape. In January, the World Economic Forum gathered in Davos, Switzerland for their 48th annual meeting. The aim of the event is to bring world leaders together and develop a collaborative approach to global issues. And out of the meeting, they produced the Global Risk Report. In 2018's report, cyber attacks were ranked in the top 5 societal risks globally. The report acknowledges that cybersecurity risks are growing both in prevalence and disruptive potential. For me, there are 2 key takeaways from the report. The cost of cybercrime is rapidly increasing. The numbers within the report state that the average cost of cybercrime per enterprise in 2017 was just under £12 million, and that represents a year-on-year increase of about 27.5%. The projected cost of cybercrime to business over the next 5 years is expected to be $8 trillion. To recap some of the significant cyber events in 2017, I just want to touch upon two examples specifically referenced within the World Economic Forum report, which had real-world societal impact. The WannaCry and NotPetya malware attacks propagated through Eternal Blue, an exploit developed by the US National Security Agency, which leaked in March last year. And in terms of real-world societal impact, the WannaCry ransomware caused the NHS here in the UK to cancel 19,000 hospital appointments, some of which were operations. The other example, NotPetya, caused the global shipping company Maersk to go dark for 10 days. They lost access to all digital corporate resources and they had to resort to WhatsApp for corporate communications. The Maersk CEO is quoted as suggesting the attack cost them somewhere in the region of $250 to $300 million, with similar losses reported by FedEx and the pharmaceutical giant Merck. So Checkpoint has kept pace with the evolution of cyber attacks over the last 25 years. In the first generation of attacks, in the late 80s, these attacks were distributed via floppy disk, targeting standalone PCs, and as a result, antivirus was developed. With the dawn of the internet, second generation attacks saw hackers targeting networks, and to combat this, Checkpoint developed the world's first stateful inspection firewall. Wind the clock forward to the millennium, and hackers, realizing they could no longer get into the network, started targeting application traffic traversing specific ports. And as a result, we developed IDS or IPS technology to combat this. In the mid-2000s, we moved into an era of the payload. Hackers started getting pretty sophisticated and were hiding previously unknown malicious code, typically referred to as 0 days, within legitimate business content. To combat this, first generation sandboxing was developed to open content within a controlled environment and look for malicious behavior. At Checkpoint, we believe we're now seeing the 5th generation of cyber attacks. So let's take a look at the characteristics of one of these 5th gen mega attacks. Firstly, we're seeing these attacks propagate across multiple geographies and industry sectors. Both NotPetya and WannaCry, as examples, spread worldwide within days. Gen 5 attacks leverage state-developed malicious code and exploit techniques. We're seeing malware being developed by groups with almost unlimited resources. The impact is huge, not only resulting in financial losses, but potentially much worse. For example, WannaCry causing the cancellation of, as I mentioned earlier, 19,000 hospital appointments here in the UK. And the root in is no longer just the network or the endpoint. Attackers are getting much smarter and leveraging weaknesses in the security of mobile devices and cloud applications to gain access to other areas of the corporate environment. Excuse me. What do we mean by attack surfaces and vectors? Well, if we think of an enterprise or an organization as a city, the surface would be the route in, which motorway or train line are they taking in, with the vector being the mode of transport. Did they take a bus, a train, or a car, or even a motorcycle? So not only are the surfaces or routes widening, there are more vehicles traversing these routes than ever before. For me, the key takeaway here is that we're now seeing attackers leverage complexity and weakness in cloud application or mobile device security to, for example, steal corporate credentials and then move laterally within an organization, gaining access to endpoints or other areas of the network. So this slide was originally created for CPX in 2017. Everyone understands and loves the Magic Quadrant. Thank you, Gartner. And it really highlights the thinking at the time, being the best way to generate funds via cybercrime was to hold people's data to ransom. So what's changed? Well, right now I'm considering a purchase. Normally in computing, you use fans to draw the heat away from the server room. But now you can purchase radiators, which utilize the excess heat from CPUs and GPUs to heat your house whilst mining cryptocurrency. So if we move to the 2018 cybercrime Magic Quadrant, ransomware is on a decline, mainly due to two factors. Malware like NotPetya effectively ruined the reputation of ransomware, as there was no way to recover the data. But it's also not a particularly effective way to generate money, as you're reliant on people paying the ransom and therefore have to wait for the cash. Another problem with ransomware is it's quite noisy. The user is acutely aware they've been affected. Crypto mining or cryptojacking, as soon as you're infected, you effectively start printing money for the criminals. Cryptojacking is also designed to be as stealthy as possible. The longer mining malware can linger on an endpoint, the more money you're making. So how much money can you make cryptojacking? Well, as of yesterday, the Bitcoin exchange rate for one Bitcoin was just under £5,000. And every 10 minutes when a transaction is signed, the payout is 12.5 Bitcoin. This equates to £61,437. Of course, this is shared, however, but as you can see, there's very, very good money to be made mining cryptocurrency. And also bear in mind, Bitcoin is just one of a myriad of cryptocurrencies out there that all need to be mined. The information shown here is gathered from hundreds of thousands of gateways spread across 180 countries, 500 million monthly emulations, and millions of endpoints and mobile devices. And to highlight the current problem, in the first half of 2018, the top 3 malware variants were all crypto mining or cryptojacking tools. So in summary, crypto mining is the new cash cow for cyber criminals. It's free money and we can let someone else pay the bills. So what do we do about this problem? The goal for us at Checkpoint is absolute prevention. At its core, the Sandblast architecture or enterprise security platform pivots around 2 core security patterns: emulation to detect malicious behavior and extraction to block threats with no delays or impact to productivity. And we apply these 2 core security patterns across the full Sandblast family, covering all attack surfaces, the network, endpoints, cloud and mobile, and all of the associated vectors within. So if we dig into emulation technology first, it's powered by over 30 detection engines, all working concurrently to provide our clients with the best independently verified catch rate on the market with 0 false positives. So we dig into a few examples of engines which are unique to us here at Checkpoint and why they're important. The first is looking for exploit and evasion techniques at the CPU level. This evasion resistance is a unique key feature of emulation, and it allows us to detect malware before an evasion script designed to trick first-generation sandboxing can run. If we move to push forward, another unique feature of emulation, Flash is prevalent across all attack surfaces and browsing vectors. Coupled with lots of known vulnerabilities, it's a route often traversed by attackers. The challenge with Flash malware is it can often have dependencies on other processes to trigger. So what push forward does is it takes the Flash file, surrounds it with a framework which reproduces these dependencies, causing the malware to trigger rather than appear benign. And the final example, Cadet, or context-aware detection, is one of our newer and cooler machine learning engines. Rather than looking at just an individual link or file, it works in the background, taking thousands of IOCs from other engines, combining them with Checkpoint's unique visibility into 25 years worth of rich big data in Threat Cloud to make an enhanced intelligence-driven verdict. It's become a key feature of Sandblast by transferring this rich data set to an AI model specifically tuned around accuracy. We have significantly improved the precision on threat emulation verdicts and virtually eliminated false positives. All of this is achieved within an average of 2 minutes. And I appreciate in the context of normal business traffic flow, 2 minutes can seem like a long time, which is why we combine threat emulation and threat prevention. Which is why we combine threat emulation with threat prevention and extraction, eliminating any disruption to business flow typically associated with legacy sandboxing. So typically, first-gen sandboxing will let a file or an executable flow through on the first pass and won't block anything until the sandboxing process is complete with a malicious verdict. The implication being that the malware is now already within the network with patient 0 infected, and now potentially moving laterally within the organization. The alternative in this scenario would be to block everything until a verdict is reached. However, with the process typically taking minutes or tens of minutes for hundreds and possibly thousands of files, it's just unacceptable to most businesses in the context of productivity. We at Checkpoint are able to prevent the patient zero infection with no disruption to business flow using a combination of prevention via inline blocking across all channels and extraction. So threat extraction completely mitigates the delays associated with legacy sandboxing by removing any potentially malicious active content from the documents and delivering them in real time. In clean mode, the file is delivered in its original format minus any active code. For example, the JavaScript or macros have been stripped out. And typically this process is referred to as content disarm and reconstruct. It has recently been recommended by Gartner as a core security pattern to prevent highly sophisticated attacks. If security is paramount, we have a second option where the file is converted or flattened to a PDF. Based upon some of the new enhancements and engines such as push forward and cadet that I just mentioned, and leveraging machine learning and AI, along with proactive prevention through extraction, we were delighted to achieve the best score in last year's breach prevention report from NSS Labs with no false positives. The key takeaway here is that not only do we have the highest security performance, we did all of this on a single consolidated appliance, thus giving us the lowest TCO of all of the technologies tested. So with Sandblast Agent, we extend our best-in-class network solution to the endpoint, in addition enhancing the level of protection for users when working outside of the corporate network. Today I'll talk a bit about how we protect users from zero-day phishing sites and stop the reuse of corporate logins on personal applications. We have the capability to stop processes or quarantine entire systems. One of our more prominent features these days, anti-ransomware with its snapshot and restoration capabilities. And finally, EDR capability is a must for incident response teams now. We automate the reporting process, providing detailed forensic information. But before we dig into the weeds on some of these enhancements, let's take a quick look at why advanced threat prevention on the endpoint is essential in the current climate. In 2018, the phrase working 9 to 5 is by and large limited to Dolly Parton fans singing karaoke. The modern workforce is powered by interconnected technologies. We move into an era of hypermobility, effectively creating the anywhere office. This presents a challenge as workers still require access to the same corporate resources, but are no longer sat within the traditional perimeter, and therefore lose the level of protection you would normally gain within the network. If we go back to the example of NotPetya, the fake ransomware, it was designed to spread laterally and infect the entire network. And increasingly, we're seeing this as a baked-in standard feature of modern malware. The risk to organizations without state-of-the-art endpoint protection bringing something in which spreads to other systems. With Gen 5 attacks, some of which are becoming so sophisticated they could successfully evade even advanced network controls, the only way to detect them is to run heuristic or behavioral analysis algorithms during runtime on the endpoint itself. And lastly, the ability to understand key attack information such as entry point, scope of damage, and infected host is vital for fast, effective incident response, or EDR to use the market definition. Ultimately, automating the forensic process will get us all back to work sooner. Excuse me. Looking at attacks which specifically target employees and their devices, we can split them into two distinct categories. Firstly, social engineering. These attacks represent the majority of endpoint threats at a touch over 50%. In this scenario, attackers will invest in mimicking legitimate websites or emailing a link to a phishing website in the hope that a user enters their credentials. According to Checkpoint's research, half of attacks will not involve any malware and will focus on hijacking user accounts and then leveraging this information later on to gain access to other areas of the organization's infrastructure. If we look at the remaining attacks, 35% of them do involve some kind of malware. The key takeaway here being that pretty much the entire endpoint market is focused on antivirus, and most endpoint players don't offer any protection from zero-day phishing or social engineering attacks. So let's take a look at how we mitigate even the most sophisticated social engineering attacks. Sandblast Agent has a zero-day phishing module, currently the only available solution on the market to truly protect users against zero-day phishing and social engineering attacks. It protects both employees who are unintentionally trying to access a phishing website, but also when employees are using their corporate credentials for use in personal applications. So how does it work? In this example, we received an email asking me to update my Office 365 credentials. We click the link, which seems legitimate. However, the zero phishing protection dynamically analyzes the website, not relying only on the reputation of the IP or the URL or domain, but it leverages additional dynamic elements like visual similarity and textual similarity to give us a verdict in a few seconds as to whether it's a legitimate or malicious website. Moving to corporate credentials in personal applications, for example, an Office 365 login being used for a personal mail account, Sandblast Agent will alert or block the ability to repurpose the corporate username and password. If we move to zero-day malware, as I mentioned with Sandblast Agent, you essentially extend all of the market-leading threat emulation and prevention capabilities associated with network to your endpoints. So taking advantage of our flexible deployment options, we can either send downloads to the Sandblast Cloud service or your own private Sandblast Cloud. Remote workers still get protection from threat emulation's 30+ unique detection engines, such as the ones I mentioned earlier, CPU level, anti-evasion, and cadet, but also threat extraction to block threats with no delays or impact to productivity typically associated with first-generation sandboxing. Given the topics that I touched on earlier around crypto mining or cryptojacking, moving on to anti-bots, it's become more and more important, a more and more important feature of Sandblast Agent. So, real-time threat information is delivered via anti-bots' constant communication with Threat Cloud. All outgoing traffic is inspected with anything suspicious being blocked, and if required, we're able to lock down specific processes or, if required, the entire machine itself. Our anti-ransomware feature will block the most advanced zero-day ransomware. It's an important feature as we're enabling businesses to continue daily operation with no disruption. Anti-ransomware prevents, for example, WannaCry and Petya by using a purpose-built behavioral analysis engine capable of both detection and remediation of ransomware infections. Infections are automatically and fully quarantined based upon forensic analysis. And then through the snapshot feature, files that were encrypted are automatically restored to their original state prior to the attack's containment. Within Sandblast Agent, you have full endpoint detection and response capabilities. And this is an important key feature given the faster and more automated the incident response process is, the quicker we get back to work. Forensic information is constantly collected from a range of services on the endpoint itself. Detailed reporting is automatically generated upon detection of any kind of malicious behavior. We leverage machine learning and AI to analyze that forensic information. And then a report is created with full attack chain information. We help incident response teams discover the entry point, how widespread the damage is, and which hosts have been infected. So in closing, as a result of the new zero-day features and enhancements like anti-ransomware and zero phishing we've made within Sandblast Agent, we were delighted to be recognized by Forrester as a leader. I really like this slide personally. From my experience, having spent some time with a large AV vendor 4 or 5 years ago, I would not have really considered Checkpoint as part of the endpoint competitive landscape. And our placement here really speaks to the investment made over the last few years by Checkpoint in Sandblast Agent. If I were back at that AV vendor, I'd be pretty worried right now. So thank you for your time, everyone. That's me. I will hand over to Andy Nicholson to actually run you through a demo of this technology.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, and you have control. So if you want to share your screen, Andy, you should be good to go.
Excellent. I'll share that in just a moment. Thank you. Very sorry, everyone. I've had a couple of transport issues with road closures today, so I'm a little bit behind where I should be. I'm just bringing up the environment now. And if the screen refreshes, we should, hopefully, I should be able to open the environment and start sharing.
Just while you do so, Andy, I'd just like to invite the audience if you have any questions off the back of Edie's presentation, if they want to type them into the questions box, and we can do a short pause for questions while you have the demo lab firing up. So if
that's a very good idea.
There were questions for AD in terms of some of the threats he talked about, the cryptojacking, crypto mining, or any of the anti-ransomware elements that he's spoken around, then please do send them in, and I'm more than happy to pose them to AD on the line.
Thank you, Shona. More than happy to take questions, guys.
So I do have one question for you, just regarding, you mentioned an anti-ransomware element to the Sandblast product. Can you just give us a bit more information around the specific solution around anti-ransomware, please?
Sure. So in summary, what anti-ransomware is doing is it's constantly running behavioral and heuristic analysis on the endpoint itself, looking for any kind of malicious behavior. And when a user instigates a process on the endpoint that would typically be seen as a precursor to a ransomware infection, anti-ransomware takes a snapshot of the machine itself. So that if a ransomware infection does actually take place, the first thing we can do is we can remediate the infection itself, but also then decrypt or roll back any files that were encrypted as part of the ransomware infection.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. That's useful. So it's not only is it blocking the ransomware, it's actually enabling businesses to get the original files back. Is that correct?
100%, yes. So not only do we quarantine the infection, we restore the machine back to its state prior to the ransomware infection.
Okay.
With the intention of, as you're absolutely right in saying, no disruption to business.
Perfect. Andy, how are you getting on in terms of bringing the lab up?
The lab is just spinning up now. And I've shared my screen. Can everybody see that now?
I can indeed. I'm just going to mute myself off so we don't get feedback and let you get on with sharing some of the technical elements of the demonstration.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Oh, no, I do not want to leave the webinar. I just want to make all of those things smaller. That's how you hide it. Yes. Let me just get rid of some of these things that are in my way. I'll lose that. I'll use that. I'll stick that down there at the bottom right. It might not be too much in the way. So, as we can see here, we have an environment just starting up now with a number of machines within it. We have an attacker. We have some protected network PCs. We have Bob and Pamela and Dan PCs. So we can compare and contrast the various kinds of protection we can give by looking at these different PCs. So if we open Pamela's PC, I get rid of that audio panel, we can see that Pamela has Sandblast Agent installed. And if we go over to the attacker PC here, and we then go when this decides to display properly, if we go to Windows Live Mail, we can see here some email drafts that are ready for us to send. So what I'm going to demonstrate first is, if I just minimize that window, if I double click on this icon here, what we will do is choose a file name from the list above, resume.doc, and I enter some random characters, and these random characters go into a script which modifies resume.doc and creates a new variant of that file with a new hash so that it will bypass traditional AV scanners, which are signature-based, and would therefore only pick up the original versions of the file. So having created a brand new variant of this piece of malware, I've now got the ability to attach a file to this email. So if I open that email draft, and then we can attach a file to it, we can see that resume.doc was created today. So that is the new variant of the file that I've just made. If I attach that file and I send that, I can also send, tell you what, got the email addresses wrong on that one, I'm very sorry. I shall forward that email with its attachments to Pamela and Bob. And then if we go back to Pamela's PC, I'll get rid of her Sandblast Agent client and open her email client. We can see here that we've got an email at 10:43, which has resume.doc attached to it. And if I open that now, what we see is that that file has been modified by Checkpoint Sandblast Agent. We've taken out all of the malicious code, and there is not actually enough code left to run on this particular file. So what we've done there is we've ripped out all of the malicious code from the attachment. The user is entirely protected, and the malware has been remediated. If we went over now to the management server for Sandblast Agent, we would be able to look at the logs for that, and we would be able to determine what the malware type was. We can see results from the emulation itself. So we can see an emulation report that shows us the full spread of the attack. It's actually rather awkward to do that in this demo environment because of the screen size. It doesn't display very well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to show you a real live forensics report from a PC it's actually my laptop. So if I minimize all of my windows so that you've just got my endpoint client here, we can see here that I have deliberately done some silly things in order to generate forensics reports. We can see here one from Sandblast Threat Emulation, which indicates a file that I managed to download to my laptop. And we can see that the threat emulation report says this particular file that I got onto my laptop through nefarious means, it works just as well as on the email channel as it works on, for example, USB. So if I had brought this piece of malware onto my machine using a removable media device, USB stick, a removable hard drive, that sort of thing, Sandblast Agent is able to pick that up too. We can see the file name. We can see that in this particular case, it was downloaded compressed by Firefox from a particular IP address, and we can see that Sandblast Agent stopped the execution of the malicious code in that particular zip file before any damage was detected. If we have a look further across the endpoint report, sorry, the forensics report, we can see the general information of file types, where the trigger was it Sandblast Threat Emulation? Was it our anti-bot technology? Did we detect some outbound traffic that indicated the presence of this threat? If we go on to the entry point tab, we can see that in this case, the entry point was Firefox. We can see that it was accessed from a particular IP address and that the file was written to the disk by Firefox. That's the Windows Explorer renaming the Firefox temp file to the original name of the file in question. On the remediation tab, we can see what actions have been taken. So in this case, we can see that this particular file wasn't remediated. Because it was on the disk. It didn't take out any malicious actions, and Sandblast Agent didn't clean it. We just deleted the file. So we didn't quarantine it. We just removed the file from the disk. On the business impact screen, in this case, we can see that there were no events detected. But in the case of a real and malicious attack, we would see here the list of any files that were touched by the malicious code, any files that were potentially exfiltrated from the user's PC, registry changes, that sort of thing. If we have a look also at the incident details tree, nope, there's not enough data on this particular report to show that. So let's see if we can find another example report for you. If I just try this one, see if there's anything in the execution tree on that one. No, unfortunately not. Right, bear with me a second on that one. I'm very sorry, folks. I shall just find a more representative example report. Just give me a second. Yes, there we go. If I save that, and then I can, when Explorer starts behaving again, I can open this up and show you it. Just give me a moment. Right, there we go. Can everybody see my screen again?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Right. Okay. This is a more comprehensive example report from that I've got on my hard disk. So if we have a look at this, the forensics report shows us that this particular piece of malware had one malicious process, made one malicious connection. So we spotted some outbound traffic from this piece of malware that indicated it was malicious, as well as some other activity that this malicious process took out. In the attack type section, we can see that it's capable of stealing information. It's also a Bitcoin miner, and it's high riskware. We can see that it entered this system in this example by being launched through PowerShell. And if we look at the tree here, we can see the full, if I can find, there we go, find a way of showing it all on one screen. We can see the full tree and full tree for the flow of the attack. So we can see that PowerShell, if I zoom in, PowerShell started this attack for us. It created this particular executable, which we have discovered to be the miner itself. It's got Bitcoin wallet access. It does random message creation. It persists over reboots, etc. We can see that that spawned several processes under cmd.exe. It also deleted the volume shadow copies, which is a common malware technique, because obviously if your shadow copies are gone, it's rather difficult for you to remediate the attack. And it also killed off something else. That may well be, it killed off 1, 2, 3 task kills there. So they will likely be, that's a killing off SQL. That's killing off SQLite. So it's killing off processes on the user's desktop also. To just go back through this for the other tabs, the suspicious events screen shows us abnormal behavior. It shows us the Bitcoin wallet access, creation of 393 ransom messages. We can see that it persists over reboots. By putting things into the user's profile, we can see that it dropped another couple of executables, terminated 3 other processes. So we can get from the forensics report the entire flow of the attack, all of the information that we need in order to remediate it or further support investigation of the attack flow. So does anybody have any questions about how Sandblast Agent works, how it does what it does, and what other information we can get from the forensics report? I'm just conscious that we're about to run up towards the end of the webinar.
So if you have any questions on anything that you have seen, please do post them via the questions and chat box. Whilst you do so, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Edie for his presentation today, thank Andy for his your demonstration today. No online demo is absolutely flawless, and I think you can certainly the elements of it.
Certainly true. Sorry about that, folks.
This was not pre-canned or pre-recorded. Just thank everyone for their time in attending today. Thank Edie and thank Andy for taking the time to come along and share some of their insights and how the technologies actually work. So I will give it about 30 seconds more for anyone to type any questions into the chat box, into the questions box, or raise your hands, and I'll make yourselves known via the chat. I'd like to thank everyone who attended today for taking the time to actually attend the session live. I appreciate that it is difficult to get time out of your busy schedules to attend such webinars, so thank you very much yourselves for doing that. We have recorded today's session, so should you wish to share the slides or share the actual recording with your teams, I will make sure that I send the link through so that you can do so. And please do just take a couple of minutes at the end just to fill in that feedback survey, just so that we understand, how we can improve in future. I haven't got any further questions at the moment, so I'm going to wrap up. Of course, any questions are more than welcome via your Bytes account manager, or even if you drop me an email once I send the recording. If anything occurs to you post session, that would be absolutely fine. Thanks everyone for attending, and thank you again to Adi and Andy for joining us this morning. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you for your time, everyone.